All right, so this video is going to cover overseas assignment topics or concepts. These are some terms that you should be familiar with if you are hoping for an overseas assignment, or you are expecting an overseas assignment, or you've just received an overseas assignment, particularly if you're newer to the Air Force. And although I say Air Force, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is strictly Air Force terminology. This actually, for the most part, applies to all DoDs. So these terms include overseas short tours, overseas long tours, SOFA, command sponsorship, visa, DRose, no fee passport, mandatory movers, extensions, COTS, and ipcot. So if you have never heard of these terms, or you may know a couple of them, but you don't really know what they mean, this video is for you. I'm going to go through just the basics of these, and there's a lot to unpack here. So make sure you do your own research because it changes a lot too. But these terms are pretty fixed, and they will kind of give you the baseline understanding of what overseas assignments have to offer and what kind of limits you might be expecting. All right, so stay tuned, hit the subscribe button, please drop a like. All right, now the first topic I'm going to cover is going to be overseas short tours. Now, overseas short tours are often known as remote assignments, and these places are usually a little further out of the way, but they're not actually remote in some cases. And these are unaccompanied tours in most cases. And when we say short tours, these short tours are overseas assignments that typically only last for 1 year. Now, you can extend those, and there are all sorts of different variables to consider, right? But in most cases, a short tour, 1 year, and it's unaccompanied, so you won't be bringing your family or pets or POV. Now, obviously, there are some places where you can do this. Korea is one of them. Maybe one site in Turkey that I've heard of recently, but for the most part, that's kind of how it is for most people. And you can actually find this literature on MIPers. So an overseas short tour for most people is 1 year. Now, one of the things about overseas short tours is that because it's only a year, and because of the way big Air Force or big DoD operates, and they have to plan out administratively, hey, where's everyone going? They move pieces, and it causes other pieces to move on the puzzle board, right? So when you get a 1 year assignment, you pretty much already know that you have another assignment coming right away. In fact, your assignment window will basically open by the time you get there. So what they'll do is they'll give you a short tour assignment, and then they'll often give you a follow-on assignment. And that follow-on assignment often comes in your favor, but not always. And this can be referred to as base of preference. Now, base of preference is a more general term, but a follow-on assignment, you can at least bet on that. If you are going somewhere like Korea or Turkey or Portugal Lodges Field, Diego Garcia, some of these short tour assignments, there's a good chance you already know where you're going on the follow-on assignment. Number two is going to be overseas long tours. Now, overseas long tours differ from short tours in the fact that they are considered like your permanent assignment. Permanent assignment as in it's a fixed tour, but it is your home station. And it's your home station in the sense that you can bring a POV, a personally owned vehicle. You will find housing, whether that's on base or whether it's off base, whether you want to rent or even buy in some cases. And you will bring your family and dependents, and they will have facilities available for them to go to school, go to work, and all those other requirements that you need to live in one area for an extended period of time. Places like this, they are overseas, but some of them can actually include United States territories like Alaska, Hawaii, but more notable would be like places like Ramstein, Aviano, Italy, Yokota, Japan, and so on. And so these places are permanent home stations. Now here's where it gets real kind of wonky. There are just so many different varieties of overseas long tours that they're based on criteria. So if you're unaccompanied, that means you don't have dependents. The standard overseas tour, long tour, is going to be 2 years. If you somehow get an overseas long extended tour, that's going to be 3 years. Now, if you have a family, you have dependents, the standard overseas long tour is 3 years. If you have dependents and you get an overseas long extended tour, you're going to get 4 years. Now, that is very convoluted, and you'll know you get this assignment when you receive your assignment. It'll say extended long or overseas long, but it's just complicated like that. So when you volunteer, when you make your basic preference list, for your dream sheet where you have all your assignments racked and stacked based on preference, you'll see that option available, and that will be how it's not necessarily guaranteed in that you're going to get those assignments like that, but it is that criteria that gets factored in, and how you might get an assignment on the back end. Now, I mentioned that short tours and long tours are both controlled tours. And why are they controlled tours? And it's because of something called SOFA. Status of Forces Agreement is something that the United States government has with the host nation, whether it's Germany, Japan, Korea, etc. And the SOFA is a very comprehensive, just bureaucratic agreement, administrative document, a lot of legal jargon in there, and what it covers is everything that is required to keep U.S. forces in a foreign country. I mean, it covers taxes, childcare, whether or not your children can go to school, on the economy, what kind of vehicles you can own and drive and ship. And it even covers, if you've seen my hunting videos, the fact that I can hunt here and own firearms as a U.S. American citizen in the country of Germany is something that's covered in SOFA, so the Status of Forces Agreement. And this SOFA is your visa while you're staying in the country. And this is really important because as a U.S. service member, you don't require a passport per se to be in the country of Germany, in my case, right? Or in Japan, wherever you have orders to. Your orders are your allowance to be there as a non-citizen for that country. And this is interesting because this leads to my next topic. Yes, you can be in that country, but what about your dependents? So with the SOFA, there's also the requirement for a no-fee passport. The no-fee passport is basically that allowance for your dependents, all the way to babies, to actually be in that country on your orders in accordance with the SOFA. So like, I'll use Germany as the example because it's what I know best, but if you're a U.S. citizen, you can't be in the country of Germany for more than 90 days with your tourist passport. If you're in the country for more than 90 days with a regular U.S. blue tourist passport, like let's say family comes to visit you and they want to stay with you for an extended period of time, they can't technically do that. Once they break 91 days or they get into that 91st day, they're in the country illegally. They need a work visa, they need a student visa, they need some sort of support and acknowledgement by the German government that they are in that country, and they can't just ride your orders and can't stay in your house, and they're breaking the law at that point. And so things like that are covered in the SOFA. So a no-fee passport, when you get your overseas assignment, any dependents that you have, they are allotted an overseas passport called a no-fee passport, and it's only good for that country that you have orders for. It looks just like a regular passport, but they can't use it to cross borders. They can only use it to, travel from that country back to the United States and so forth. So no-fee passport, it is required, and you will get instructions when you have that overseas assignment. Now, one more thing about SOFA and how it pertains to your family is a term called command sponsorship. Now, I mentioned the no-fee passport, and that's a requirement for all dependents. But the other thing that is required for your dependents is command sponsorship. And this is the status that you get. Now, I mentioned everyone has that no-fee passport, but just because you get an overseas assignment doesn't mean that your family is automatically going to follow you. And there can be a number of reasons why they wouldn't be able to follow you. Honestly, the list is way too long, but I'll just use my own case. In my own example, my wife, who was a dependent before she ended up joining herself, she was unable to secure her no-fee passport when I got orders to Germany initially. So I had an accompanied assignment to Germany, and because her no-fee passport got lost in the mail, our assignment was potentially on the hook to become an unaccompanied assignment because she could not get command sponsorship without that no-fee passport. It's a requirement. It's a hard requirement. Now, I didn't lose that status, but I would have gone on without her and then had to apply and through the process to get command sponsorship. And a lot of times there are personal reasons why families can't join each other immediately or go to that next assignment on their own. So if you have to leave without your family, for whatever reason that might be, you can always apply later on down the line for command sponsorship. And this is not necessarily a straightforward process, but it can be done, and it just requires a little time and a little effort. But command sponsorship is something that just basically means that you're a company tour and that unit or base can support your family, and in most cases it does work out. Now, if you are familiar with the term EFMP, that's definitely something to consider too, because Exceptional Family Member Program, or EFMP, is when you have a certain family member that might have medical needs or special needs, and those members get categorized in the military system as EFMP. And so that's a special status that you have on your records. And oftentimes there are members that have EFMP family, and they'll get an assignment, but they can't actually go to this assignment with their family members. And the reason for that is because they may require certain medical assistance or care or service that isn't available at that particular location. Now, most countries, you would assume, would have all facilities available in the modern, first world. But, there are always just certain reasons why it might be too far away. Maybe DoD doesn't have an agreement with the local host nation to provide that service. And maybe DoD just doesn't have the manning to support that special program or whatever it is that you might require for your family. So EFMP is definitely something that you should think about and be aware of, because it can be just a restraint on what assignments you can actually get. So now that you know what the status of forces agreement is, and you know about these no-fee passports, what's the next item? The next item is your DRose. Your DRose is really important because all overseas tours, because you are in that gray space, right? You are there in another country under the orders of the United States government. You have a DRose, and this is kind of like, basically like your visa, eligible to return from overseas. Now, when you get one of those tours, whether it's a short tour, whether it's an overseas long, whether it's overseas extended long, whether you're accompanied or unaccompanied, all that includes that you will have a DRose. You will have a date, and that date will be 1, 2, 3, or 4 years from your arrival on station, or your report no later than date. And that is that fixed term. Once you get up to that date, you get up against that 31 whatever end of the month term, you have to be out of the country. Otherwise, you are in that country illegally for all intents and purposes. And so that DRose will determine when you're going to be leaving that base. And now, even though it's a fixed date, it can be moved, but it just has to be moved in a very orderly process. And so that leads to my next topic. So you have a DRose, and it coincides with your assignment term length, but the DRose can be moved for reasons. These include extensions. That's usually, like, everyone's familiar with the term extensions, and these can be for a number of reasons. There are too many reasons to list, but the thing about extensions is they have to be justified. So you need to have the mission requirements, or you have to be doing something for your family, and you have to be doing all these different, you have to meet criteria, right? You can only extend so many times, as many people are aware, but overseas getting an extension always has to come with some sort of justification. Sometimes these justifications are very easy, sometimes these justifications are very difficult, and it's also based on the manning, right? Like, if you are in a very small career field and you are at a very small overseas base, the chances of you getting an extension are probably smaller than they would be in a very large base with different units that support your specific career field, and so on and so on. So you can see where this goes. So extensions are the first option. The next option is going to be a COT or an ipcot. And these aren't necessarily options, these are things that just to be aware of. A COT is a continuous overseas tour. And what that means is, let's use my example earlier, like, you go to Korea, you have a short tour to Korea, and then your follow-on assignment is now going to be Ramstein. And in this case, you've now gone from one foreign country to the next. And let's not forget, you're an American citizen. So that would be considered a continuous overseas tour. Now, COTS come with incentives, and often they include an incentive flight. So the U.S. government will pay for you to fly back home to your home of residence, or equal value flight. And that's to kind of like restore some health and wellness for yourself and your family, so they can see family members that they might be dislocated from, and also just to kind of recharge your batteries emotionally. So yes, a COT is basically one overseas assignment to the next. And now, alternatively, an ipcot is an in-place continuous overseas tour. And what this does is an ipcot is a little harder to swing, but you can definitely try. Everybody can try, right? And it basically doubles your overseas assignment at the place you're at in place, and you'll just double that assignment. So if you have a 3-year overseas tour to Aviano, Italy, and you apply for an ipcot, that ipcot will double your 3-year assignment into a 6-year assignment, and now you'll be at Aviano, Italy for 6 years. And this is good and bad. It sounds like a great thing, but being stuck in one place for a very long time is not always the best thing for a number of reasons, and I'll just leave that, put that to a side. But yes, ipcot is the other one. Okay, so now that we know what a DRose and a SOFA is, here's the interesting thing. Now, every overseas assignment is a fixed tour, and a fixed tour is really interesting because a fixed tour has a certain status that you will enter when you get towards the end of that assignment, and that's called a mandatory mover. And a mandatory mover is different from a CONUS or Continental United States assignment, because a CONUS assignment, you can get somewhere and stay there almost indefinitely. You've probably heard stories about people going to small bases, places in the middle of nowhere, and they get stuck there for years on end with no real definite way out or fixed term that they might be leaving and can look forward to. But when you're overseas, you always have to leave because of that DRose, that visa, that SOFA. And this mandatory mover is interesting because when the personnel center for your branch of service decides to start giving out assignments, because mandatory movers overseas are must moves or mandatory, right? They get kind of a preferential ordering or dissemination of orders as they come out. And so there's an actual list that's available on MyPers if you want to reference that, and you can see the priority list that they have. So mandatory movers often are systematically favored for certain bases or certain assignments, right? Now this doesn't always work in your favor, but it's just something to consider that a lot of people think that moving frequently in your career as a military member is good for you, and that there are reasons for that. But this is something that you have to be cognizant of. You become a mandatory mover, and therefore you will kind of be at the top of the stack when they start giving assignments out, and that can often work in your favor. So that about covers all the overseas assignment terminology, or at least the baseline. Now remember, this is a very big topic, and there are a lot of different variables, nuance, and just all sorts of crazy experiences, and this information can change from time to time. But for the most part, these core concepts have kind of been fixed for a while, and they are also reciprocal throughout the DoD program. So DoD, they have a lot of service members overseas, and so they have to have an established system to make things work and make things flow a little better. So if you study these terms, look deeper into them. I suggest you go into MyPers if you have a CAC and you have access. If you're just a brand new hopeful recruit, this is good information for you to know, and it'll give you an idea where you need to start researching. So thanks for watching. If you like this material, please hit subscribe, drop a like, and if you have any questions or comments that maybe I can get back and do a follow-up video, please drop it in the comment box. Thanks for watching. God bless.